Well, good day and welcome back to Frontlines and Faultlines with Mike Kelly. Today we're very fortunate to continue our conversation with Mark Binskin. And you'll recall last time we were talking about targeting processes and different weapon systems, and so important and relevant to all of the everyday discussions we're seeing now around the various conflicts in Ukraine and Middle East, etc. And there's the technological advancement dimensions to this. There's all those human factors to take into effect, and how command and control works in these situations, and how coalition environments, how they get resolved in different targeting approaches. So we talked last time about the very deliberative targeting process. We have, software tools which can do a lot of very detailed and fast analysis, and you can get quick decisions from them. But we mentioned last time you also have the time-sensitive targeting issue. And so we roll forward into Afghanistan, and, things have evolved a bit. We're getting, even better technology, faster technology. But it still didn't help us a lot when it came to time-sensitive targets. And we had these, the odd wedding party and whatnot, mistakes being made. So what's the issue there when you're looking at those time-sensitive targets?
So first thing I'd say, and we're talking last week when we're talking about it, we're sitting here very casually talking about this. There's nothing casual about it, especially in time-sensitive. There's a lot of pressures. You might have eyes on for a certain period, or you might only have, especially in Afghanistan where air was limited, you might only have certain air availables for a certain period. They're on station. You're getting a call in from people eyes on to do it, or maybe not eyes on. There might be other ways that you've done the identification of it, and you're trying to pull it all together and do it. And it gets back to the way up of the military advantage vice the potential to get it wrong, or the risk and the like. So you've got all that running, and so you've got the procedures you step through. You try and step through quite quickly. That's the science, but there's still an art in the decision making to engage or not.
Right.
And it's hard. There is not. I don't think there's ever been a simple time-sensitive target assessment made, or a simple approval to strike. There's always risk, and the more you rush it, and the more pressures and the more people involved, the more risk the risk is there. Most of the time you get it right. There are times that and the wedding party is a classic. Remember that reporting where you get it wrong, and then you do. It's not as if you get it wrong and and everyone just moves on. There is actually a very serious assessment that goes into those that are wrong, to try and understand what led to that. Was it an initial identification issue, and then how did we identify them, and how did we talk ourselves into them being a threat or a particular target? Did we talk ourselves in, or was there some spoofing going on? Because I do know when I was in the KOC, when we were operating in Afghanistan, the enemy knew exactly what our processes were, and so they were trying to set us up to fail as well. So you have to watch out for that as well.
Right.
So there's a lot that goes on in those TSTs. As a KOC director or an air component commander, I always say to people, don't get deeply involved in what's going on. Sit there with it and watch the process work, and sit back just one removed, and make sure the decisions, the discussions, and everything are the right decisions, the right based on the right discussion and the like. So that at the end of the day, when the decision's made to engage or not, you actually have considered everything the best that you can. If you get involved very deeply in one particular part of it, you may miss an important bit of information that's going across the battle floor, that's making the decision. And it's there. None of them are easy, right? Because at the end of it, there are lives involved.
Yeah. And with TSTs, you're kind of very reliant on visuals still, which might come from satellite or drones or other sources, or human, live on the ground observation. But I did read that, you are still having problems with basically pixelation. The degree, the refined imagery, could sometimes lead you astray if you didn't have that level of refinement that could really give you the certainty on the targeting.
Yeah, we had, and it'll be the same today, we had rules on the latency of the imagery that you could use, the latency of the intelligence you could use, the latency of the overhead image. So not just imagery right there, right then, but the overhead imagery about how current it had to be to make decisions on buildings and infrastructure, and so there's a lot of rules there, and it's pretty tight on what you can get. So you had a lot of rules on all those and what you could and couldn't use, and how many you had to use. So there are some, unless you've got an eye on, there might be some levels of intelligence where you actually need multiple before you can do a positive identification.
Right.
Yeah. And then once you had the positive ID, then you could start to go through the other parts of the process. Some of these you could work in parallel. You'd be doing the problem set. So you're suspecting that that's a certain person or a certain target, normally a high value target. And while you're trying to do the positive identification part, you're already doing the targeting part, so that if it is determined that that is a correct positive identification, then you're not then wasting time doing it. You've actually done it all, so you've then got the package to make the decision.
Right.
And it's not uncommon in a TST against a high value target to get it all to the point at the end, and actually no, it's failed in one of the positive identification factors, and then you don't strike.
Right.
So, but there's a lot of people and a lot of qualified people involved in those decisions, using systems to help that decision making. But at the end of the day, the decisions are made by real people.
Right. And we've talked before about incidents in the Operation Iraqi Freedom, where ordnance went astray, Australian ordnance. And so, a lot of people will have this expectation that all your PGMs, etc., will always work. What's your experience of that been?
PGMs, most of the time, go exactly where you point it. There are times that they don't. Some of that reliability is factored into some of your CDE and your risk assessment anyway.
Right.
But sometimes it happens, and there was one I remember in Iraqi Freedom where it was an LGB against a high value target. I can't remember who it was, but it was someone very close and high up in the leadership, where I think the building was near a canal and the bomb went long, and it was a guidance issue of some sort. It could have been a pod on the jet, or it could have been a guidance issue on the bomb. I can't remember.
Right.
But we went into that in a lot of detail because it was one of the early weapons released, to understand it, because we needed to understand that, because that would fold into the subsequent approvals. Now, what was the success rate or not, or the failure rate or not?
Right.
So we have a better understanding. But again, in those sorts of conflicts, you've got the time to do it. In high-end, all-out peer versus peer, you'll get an understanding of the weapons effects and errors through battle damage assessment.
Right.
But you may not get into that level of detail of assessment. You may not have the time. Yeah.
So I guess key point 2 in this targeting world, you've got two dynamics going on there. One is you've got technical faults that can occur, and if there's a high degree of civilian casualties that emerge from that, it doesn't mean it's a war crime. It's just a technological mistake. Sure. And secondly, you've got the human factor trying to make command decisions in all of these things, and they make the best judgment that they can on the basis of the information they have available. And if that information is wrong, then it's still not a war crime. I
think the term, this is quite a mode. The term war crime rolls off commentators' tongues easily, and a lot of the times they don't understand that the process that people go through to get to this point. Now, if you do that assessment and someone goes, that's great, but I'm going to drop this anyway, or no one does an assessment, or there's a systemic issue that's running here, then maybe you might start to get into that. But it's a long jump a lot of the times from a weapon that went rogue, or a misidentification of a target, or a misdesignation of a target to it being a war crime.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, you've surfaced to like the distinction between levels of military operation, stroke conflict. So, and you've had the experience of being in both. So Afghanistan's a good example where you're just in a straight counterinsurgency type environment.
Yeah.
So every targeting mistake you make, can have a larger strategic effect than just the tactical advantage you were looking for. So, you've got to be obviously very careful with, the level of care taken, as you sort of indicating, has to be greater. And then, conventional and perhaps even existential threats, it's a whole different sort of calculus.
Yeah, it is. And so we've talked about the precision part of it and the targeting and all that. You've got to get the proportionate as well, which you know from the legal background. I think you lectured me a number of times on this. And so there's the proportionality as well as the precision. So a proportionate response or a proportionate attack for the value. And sometimes a proportionate response may not be kinetic at all. There may be another way of doing it. And I had one in Afghanistan. It was, I think it was Christmas Eve or Boxing Day Eve, where you may remember they were building the ring road because that was going to link the town. I think link the country, and I think that it's the town's either Ghazi or Gardez. It's on the ring road between Kandahar and to the north.
Yep.
And there were itinerant workers in building the roads.
Right.
And those camps were controlled by coalition. In this case, it was US. Couple of coalition folk in there, and 50 or 60 workers in this camp. It was cold. It was snowing.
Right.
The food wasn't flash, and we got a phone call direct through to the KAOK.
Right.
From the captain that's on the ground. He said, "Look, I've got a real problem here. The folk are about to revolt. It's cold. They've had enough. They're done. Is there something that you can do?"
Yeah.
And
that's right.
And so okay, and I'm looking at it, and the only thing we had was a B1 sitting just north of Baghdad, not Baghdad, up round Bagram, the airbase to the north, just sitting up there on cap. And I looked at it and did a quick calculation on the wall. I said, tell the captain, hold them for about 20 minutes. We'll have something there.
Right.
So we briefed the B1 on what we wanted, and down he went. Well, apparently a B1 supersonic at a couple of 100 feet with 4 afterburners out the back over the camp that they had seemed to solve the problem pretty well. We got a phone call back within about 5 minutes saying, "Thanks, we're good for another month." Thank you. So
Impressive flyover.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a nuclear bomber that you can use in conventional, right down to a non-kinetic effect, but it had the effect that we were after, and so that's the other part of it. It's proportionate, it's precise, but there's the effect. What's the effect that you're after?
Right.
And it may not be a kinetic strike right then on something. So all that goes into that whole targeting decision.
Creativity. It's like
creativity. That's the word.
Yeah. So I know the Israeli Air Force, for example, too. They have this door knocking type approach sometimes, where they're trying to warn people to get out of the building, and they'll drop something that'll make a noise, but it's not explosive ordnance. Yeah. So these are the kinds of things you have to
that you do if you're trying to minimise the collateral, but still have the effect. That's right. There's a lot that goes into it. It's not just a simple decision just to go and strike. Yeah.
And then there was this famous Kunduz hospital incident, MSF hospital in Afghanistan. And can you explain what actually happened there and what the consequences were?
I think from memory, because I had a look at this last year as a part of something that we did, it was an AC-130, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm going down the wrong path here. It was an AC-130. They were looking for insurgents. They were given the description of a particular compound and some coordinates. And nearby, but not too close, was a NGO hospital, set up mobile hospital in another compound. And in this there were a couple of people in the AC-130 that were trying to. They were looking at what they were seeing in the crosshairs wasn't the exact description, and I think someone questioned the coordinates that were there. That they kept getting told what they had was the right target, and so they engaged. But there was enough doubt in there, and it was probably a HVT, so high value target, that they had a fleeting chance. But they engaged when they subsequently went back to base. They discovered they'd hit the Medical Sans Frontier hospital and killed a number of people. So they went back and they did a full investigation, which you do all the time with these, and discovered, I think, the coordinates were wrong or something or other that were passed. And people were trying to match a picture that wasn't quite right to the picture, and they slowly matched it to, well, that must be it then, and engaged. And I think out of that, there were a number of people removed from positions at the US Air Force. People removed. There's a number of sanctions against a few people, and people go, "Oh, that's just a letter of reprimand." No, actually, it means it's a career ending. You know that. But there was enough doubt, I think, in the systemic side of that individuals. I don't think any individuals were charged for war crimes. I think it just went to sanctions and reprimands. Yeah.
So,
but it shows how you can talk yourself into the wrong target being the right target if there's pressures there.
Effectively, it just boils down to human error, and sometimes sort of I guess situating your appreciation or trying to join dots and forcing the join in the dots.
That's exactly right. Human nature is forcing joins when they're not there. So trying to join dots that actually
don't match,
and so that unfortunately happens, especially when you get into the heat of war. It wasn't as if they took off going out that day saying we're going to brass up a hospital. That was not the way that they went out. But if you've rotated through a number of times and you're quite comfortable, you probably don't second guess as much as you probably do when you're very early on in an operation, and they talk themselves into it. Now that's without having read the full report, but I'm pretty sure that was the basics of the
So what we're talking about is human error and a non-intentional situation. So it doesn't amount to a war crime, but disciplinary action.
There were a number of times where actually someone could have stopped it. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And so I guess disciplinary action is taken. That. Is the appropriate way to deal with it.
And it's hard to second guess in an inspector general that goes in and does it. And so I never second guess. So if I see something in a public report, I might hold a view of it, but I never try and second guess what actually happened in the cockpit or on the ground. Or whether the IGs are pretty good at investigating those sorts of things, and it's then taking that and making it a lesson learned, not just a lesson identified, and making sure that it doesn't happen again.
So, Inspector Generals or IGs.
Yeah, IGs,
And that was a US.
So that's the legal side of the investigation. Yeah, they don't get brushed under carpet or anything like that. People have a good look at it. But one thing I would say, and again, here we are talking in an armchair about an event where they're circling, the weather's probably bad, the pressure's on, that's a HVT, and so it's easy to sit in the bleachers later on, or the lounge room or whatever, and make judgment on someone that's there under pressure, sleep deprived. You get all those conditions, so we need to be very careful when we judge these things, that we know all the facts before we start looking at what the actions might be.
Yes, I think it's important for people who are not actually involved in defence, command, control, political decisions to understand that the environment you're having these expectations. And then we're having all these conversations about bringing AI into the picture. And so it's not to say, though, that even when you have the human ultimately making a targeting decision, that there's not going to be mistakes.
That's it. I heard one of those comments the other day on a podcast. In fact, it was an air warfare podcast, and it was same thing. People aren't infallible either in all this. So I think that's when you start to get the ethical and moral issues, when you've got AI making decisions.
Right. And that Kunduz situation, that was the US Air Force. So, but our ADF usually tries to watch what's going on with our coalition partners and try and take the technical and other lessons from
try and learn, and I know that there's pressures on our air crew when they go out and do these tasks. And I know that there's pressures on the components making the decisions, but it's trying to make sure that people weigh up all the information and making the decisions, and again understand the military advantage that you're doing, and also understand the operation. You'll go in if it's peer versus peer high end war fighting. There's a different set of considerations that you might have in your decision making. Vice, we're in nation building, or supporting a nation to reform or whatever. So there's different contexts that'll normally be factored into the rules of engagement, the targeting directives, the commander's intent that flow down. But ultimately, we've got to leave it to our people to make the right decisions based on that information,
right?
Because they're there in the situation, making the decisions right there, right then. So you try and make sure they have all the information that they need, the guidance that they need to be able to make the right decisions, the right weapons to match the right systems. Ultimately, they've got to take all that and they've got to make the decisions, and they are split-second decisions.
Right. As you, I think, have noted before, the situation too, where you get a attenuated operational situation and you're rotating through large numbers of personnel, having to take over command and control and other positions within this chain, and they're having to come to grips with the processes and procedures, which will be evolutionary. They'll change over time. So there'll be times too, won't there, when you do get like reservists or others coming in, like the US situation. They've got National Guard, etc., and reserves. You've seen hundreds of thousands of troops being rotated through, Gaza, for example, at the moment. So in that kind of construct, you've got a bit of an issue there too, haven't you?
Yeah, it's when a rotation comes through, you obviously have to wind back a bit, and it's not start again, but it's make sure people come in and they're in-briefed correctly, they understand the context. It might actually be worse if that's their first time in, then that's probably not the issue. If this is second or third time in, it might be an issue because the context that they were in 2 years ago or 3 years ago for these longer conflicts may be different now to what it was back then. It might have been high-end combat back then. Now we're in nation building, different rules of engagement, different mindset required. And so you need to understand people are coming in with the mindset required for that particular phase of the operation.
Right. Which sort of then brings us through to a bit more of a elevated sort of conventional type circumstance that we were in the campaign against ISIS. And you were at that time Chief of the Defence Force. And I remember, sort of and this is another lesson that people out there might not appreciate, but there's a high degree of consultation and coordination between the two sort of parties of government.
Yes.
And lots of, ability for there to be engagement and suggestions and oversight from both sides in that context. And that was a really interesting one because, and a lot of people don't know this, but, there was a heavy RAAF involvement in that campaign all the way through from, trying to help the Yazidis from being annihilated. There was a genocidal intent from ISIS there. And we were dropping food and all kinds, and for the Kurds as well who needed resupply. So you had that kind of phase of it, and then we rolled into major operations like the attempt to recover Mosul, for example, which was quite large scale. You had a population of around 1.5 million or so, and so we were in there actually delivering ordnance from our air assets, and we also had the Wedgetails in there, basically helping to manage the entire coalition air campaign.
Battle space.
Yeah. So there were also some interesting dynamics about the nature of our enemy, if you like, there as well. So, and the tactics that they employ that make this all more challenging. So, firstly, could you describe, how ISIS kind of was operating in Mosul and what that?
So ISIL, this is a classic case of here you are, you go into an operation with your morals, your integrity, and all the people that were in there, of the three services from Australia, in particular. We have a particular culture, we have a moral compass. We want to be quite ethical in this as we do the operations against an enemy that has none of that, and quite happy in their sense to just write off the population to meet their own ends.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where it does get difficult sometimes, where you're balancing what's the military advantage of doing something particular against the risk to a population where actually the stated aim of our air operations was to help the Iraqis regain control of their country and secure their borders. So that was it. And when we got to a point of that, actually we'd reached an end state and we withdrew the Hornet. So it wasn't right. We actually had a clear end state when we went in, and that end state was reached, and we started moving the forces out rather than let it linger on. A few things about that operation that are quite noteworthy, I think. Back in 2003, we deployed 75 Squadron across for operations, and we required a lot of support, a lot of transport support, contracted transport support, a lot of US support for tankers and all that. Now fast forward to 2015, you're right, there was a lead up to this. ISIL moved quite rapidly. It was ISIL, ISIS. I mean, it morphed in Syria, Daesh, and moved out of Syria, the Syria civil war, and moved across into Iraq quite quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had considerations, things that we thought were coming out of the Middle East. That was the 2013 white paper, come out of the Middle East. My directive as CDF was to reset everyone back to Australia and the like. We'd just not recovered. We just responded to MH17, a Russian shoot down of Malaysian Airlines flight. In the middle of that response, we had, I remember, Marty Dempsey, my counterpart, chairman of the Joint Chiefs in the US, rang up and said, "Binny, we've got this problem. We've got these Yazidis on Mount Sinjar. We're going in the next couple of nights to drop stores. Will Australia be in it?" And I'm quite comfortable where the government would have sat on it. They said, "We're in it. Let me work the approvals, and we'll get it." And spoke to the minister, and the minister said, "No doubt, we're in," and we did the approvals and did it. And then to the Turkmen, I think on the eastern border as well, a number of weeks later. Interestingly, during this time, this is sometimes the politics that play out. There were some of the airdrops were going slightly astray because the targets where they were dropping the airdrops to was very, very tight. I remember someone making a comment about to me, "Are you comfortable that one pallet ended up in ISIL hands?" No, because would you stop supporting the Yazidis or the Turkmen because one pallet of stores goes the wrong way? No, you wouldn't.
Yeah. Problem's been around since the Battle of Arnhem.
That's it. But boy, they're accurate drops. Our C-130 crews were fantastic, debriefing with them after it, before we even started getting into some of the kinetic stuff. They said, "Boss, it's just like a red flag." It was just the processes and what they went through to go in. So they were trained, they were comfortable going in on what were low-level drops in quite dangerous areas. So we were doing that, and then in that, it was quite clear that the Iraqis didn't have the wherewithal to stop ISIL. And so they needed some help. And the areas that they needed that were special forces training to help their special forces work up their capability and fast jets. And so I remember briefing the Prime Minister and the BBJ on the way back from Europe. Here's the concept that we can do here. And he said, "Take that concept and work it up."
Right.
We worked it up quite quickly back in Australia. And you may remember, because government and opposition were briefed at each point of this decision.
I might sort of explain that I was the opposition leader, Bill Shorten's National Security Advisor at the time, so sitting in these conversations, with the government and the agencies to enable us to ask questions and interrogate about things like rules of engagement and mission, etc.
That's it. And so it was the government basically gave the ADF direction to prepare, and then approval to deploy, and then approval to employ. And Air Force, there were very few people that knew about the discussion leading up to the approval. But basically, it was 3 weeks from approval to prepare to bombed up aircraft, being tanked by Australian tankers and controlled by Australian Wedgetail over Iraq. 3 weeks. That's an impressive time frame. And the men and women of the Air Force and the other services did a great job supporting them going in for that. But there were some tight rules of engagement on them for why they were there. Subsequently, we had approval to go into eastern Syria because that was where the threat was manifesting itself as well. But the targeting processes were there. We, when I was the vice chief in 2011, 2012, we introduced targeting boards. And so we had the process all up to speed by the time we actually ended up back in operations again. So all those systems that we needed were there, but we still need to work people back up to do it. People went into the KOC. We had air component commanders with red cards and the like go in, but we showed where we had come from in the 11 years since 2003. We'd come a long way, and it was solely deployed by Australian forces going in and supporting Australian forces. We bartered with the US for weapons because it was easier to use weapons already in place. And people may remember we flew out of a Middle Eastern country to the south, but it was a long transit in and out.
Yeah, we had the refuelers.
And that was quite deliberate as well, because we knew, speaking with the leadership in that country, that we could they would approve us to do it. So the basing was always an issue. We knew that we had the basing squared away quite quickly. But also, when you looked at the range that they're flying, the mission length, if you then take that and overlay it over Darwin and overlay it north, it gives you an idea of what actually we really need to do back when we're in our own region. So we were using it to work up crews to understand what long-range missions were all about and have an understanding of that for potential future operations.
And to set that scene a little bit too, we're not talking about ragged Taliban groupings. We had about 12,000 odd ISIS fighters embedded there in Mosul. And they'd gone around and rounded up even more civilians from surrounding villages to use them as a human shield, effectively. So this is something that seems to be now quite common amongst these kind of terrorist groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and ISIS.
Oh, they all do it because they know the emotive part that plays, and the fact that it will cause us to pause in our decision making. You may also remember that they had VBIED, so vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices that were large trucks or armoured vehicles that they were crashing through Iraqi checkpoints, and they didn't care about the civilian population. They also had building-borne IEDs, and so there were times where they had people in basements of buildings that whenever a strike went in, they would destroy the building themselves. And so we're having a hard time figuring out how a bomb that landed there destroyed a building over here until we understood that there were other things at play here. And again, when you're going against a adversary that does not care about the population within which they're living, that makes it very difficult.
And in fact, that's kind of like an objective, isn't it? You create civilian casualties. It's like the asymmetric strategy. You can't contest. And I think there was something like 100,000 Iraqi and militia forces engaged in the siege. And so you can't match them for numbers. You've got to win the propaganda war.
Yeah, and it's difficult. And it puts our people in a very hard position, and hard decisions are made. During that, I had a very interesting conversation with an Iraqi general during all that. I did a visit, and we jumped in a CH-47 in Baghdad and flew 2.5 hours north to a small village just east of Mosul. It was 200 feet flight for 2 hours. In the middle of winter, and landed in this paddock out the back of this village, and went in and visited the Australian special forces that were helping support the Iraqi special forces. And they said, "Do you want to meet the general?" It's now midnight. They've just finished their planning conference for tomorrow's operation, and it was it hadn't been going good for the Iraqis at that stage. But the next day they assaulted the university, you might remember, and that was the turning point for Mosul. And I sat down with the general. He had a bit of a wash and offered me a cigarette, and I said, "Oh no, but this is your headquarters, please." And we're sitting just in one of the 4 remaining buildings in this village, and he started talking about what the challenges were for the Iraqi people, and he was probably about 68 or 70, so he had retired. He told me, and I said, "Well, so they brought you back in to do this?" And he goes, "Yes, I'm back in doing this." And I said, "Well, why that?" And he said, "Hey, I'm a patriotic Iraqi, but I have family still in Mosul."
Right.
And then he was then the lighter things of these discussions. He was probably on his 4th cigarette in about 15 or 20 minutes.
Right.
And he described to me how he retired, and he was on a pension, and he was, and then it took me a minute to realise why he was telling me this. And then he said, "Oh, and in Iraqi law, once you're on a pension, you can't then take a wage or a salary." And I looked at him, I said, "So that means," he goes, "Yes, I'm retaking Mosul on a pension," which but it was interesting getting the personal perspective from him and the sacrifices that the Iraqi people were making to get ISIL out of the country. And it was hard. Mosul was probably the hardest battle I think anyone had because of the impact it was having on the people as well. And ISIL didn't care.
Right. And it was a 9-month siege, I think, and very hard to get humanitarian relief into there.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And I think, too, by the time it was done, the damage was incredibly extensive.
Horrific. Yeah.
Something like 40,000 buildings flattened, and including, I think, 47 mosques involved in that. And
yeah, well, when you have an adversary that doesn't care, they understand what's on the restricted target list and what's not on the restricted target list, and you know, mosques and religious areas and significant cultural features, of which there's a lot in Iraq, they're all on the restricted target list. ISIL knows that, so they base themselves, schools, hospitals, and so that increases the level of difficulty for decisions about whether you're going to do a strike or not. And so that's again, what's the military value vice the benefit, vice the risk of that strike. It is a hard decision set to make.
And I think when there were hospitals that were targeted, that we had to target for that reason as well. And I know there were statements issued every time that happened to explain it, but it must have been incredibly challenging for our pilots.
Yeah, and so the pilots, to make sure the weapon's accurate and where it goes, but also for the team and the CAOC that are making these decisions. We would have low collateral weapons that we would use, and while that minimised collateral risk, a lot of the times a low collateral weapon might not actually take out the intended target. So that's difficult. But making decisions when Iraqi forces are on the ground trying to move forward and they're getting sniped at from a mosque or from a hospital or from a school, and that's on the restricted target list. So now you're going through the process of making it a legal target.
Right.
It's hard. It is the hardest decision that a lot of people in the Defence Force will make in their lifetime.
So I think there are something over 10,000 civilians killed in that.
Yeah, and I'm not across what the final assessment was.
No one will probably ever know.
I don't know if
the full
people
total
will ever know. And the question is, how many did ISIL kill? How many did ISIL set up to kill? How many were killed in street fights between Iraqi forces and ISIL? How many were killed by IEDs, VBIEDs, building-borne IEDs? And rogue weapons or wrong decisions. So I'm not sure we'll ever know.
And all of those OAD situations too, and triggering them and reserve demolitions. These are the strategies that we have to confront these days, and tough, very tough on the pilots. I hope, we've learned a lot about how to debrief and decompress. So
it's tough on the pilots. It's tough on the ground forces too. They don't know if the door they kick down is wide to bring the whole building down. They don't. So it is a very hard decision set for anyone in the Defence Force.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess 1.5 million people got displaced in the end, and so they're still rebuilding in Mosul.
Yeah.
So that was 2016 to 17. I think that siege. So it's tragic situation. But I think the international consensus was, these guys are bad, and they've got to go.
They were bad, and you look at what they did to the Iraqi people and the Kurds, the Yazidis, and the fact that they got the Fallujah, I think just outside Fallujah, so what's that, 29 kilometres west of Baghdad.
Yeah.
They needed to be stopped. And you may also remember it was a global franchise. So we ended up in the Philippines, helping the Philippines armed forces a year or two later be able to take back one of their cities.
Yeah.
And so we knew that they had to be stopped. We had a group of chiefs from like-minded countries. It was 13 countries, and we would meet on a 6-weekly basis during all that to talk about what the global strategy was. Now, it didn't mean that we're all involved in all the different areas, but we had to understand what the global strategy was so that we could coordinate and do what we needed to do, from across the Sahel into the Philippines, in the Middle East, and so the threats were popping up in areas and so it needed to be coordinated in a way.
And notoriously, a few Australian volunteers for ISIL too, who were from, in fact, basically some of those had been from crime gangs here in Australia who just thought great opportunity for rape, pillage and plunder. Yeah. And some really horrendous and confronting imagery that came out of some of that with children holding up heads.
No, you can't condone that. It's disgusting as hell.
Yeah,
it really is. And I don't understand how someone that lives in this country could think that was the right thing to do and go overseas and brag about it. Yeah. You'd have to think they're an outcast within Australia as well.
Yeah, something seriously mentally wrong. But
correct.
And we seem to be still in the throes of that kind of, international circumstance today. It kind of waxes and wanes, but a little bit in the battle for the soul of Islam at the moment with these extreme elements that have got to be, confronted.
Well, they're extreme elements, but they don't do it without backing from someone. And that's the concern.
Costs money.
Yeah, it always costs money.
Yeah. Well, look, this has been amazingly informative and just so special to get that perspective, the command and control perspective at such a level and in relation to, conventional and counterinsurgency, low-level conflict. You've seen it all.
Low level's a relative term, really, isn't it, when you put men and women in those decision-making positions.
And a bullet's still a bullet,
You got it.
Go through your head in the same way.
Yeah.
So, the challenge for our ADF personnel and for the West, in these circumstances is I hope people have a better understanding of that. And, we look forward to talking more with you, Mark. In particular, very keen to come back to you to talk about our disaster response issues as well for your sins. You ended up as head of that Royal Commission.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for your service to our country. It has been selfless, it has been effective, and at the same time, I'd just like to highlight too that my experience of working together with Mark, he was a leader who really cared about his people, and to have that, technical expertise, command and control, determination and focus, but at the same time be so concerned about your people is a really special mix. So thank you on behalf of the men and women of the Defence Force that you commanded during your time, and thank you for your service to our nation.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, everyone. We'll see you again next week for a follow-on program, and we'll hope to build on these discussions as we go forward. So thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time.